So we've had a great conversation this morning about literacy. And now we're about to have a great conversation about math. It looks like most people that went outside came back inside, so I don't think that the math has frightened you away. We're very happy to have with us Steve Leinwand, who's a 40-plus year career in math instruction with students, with teachers, with administrators. He comes to us from the American Institute of Research in Washington, D.C. And in his time with us, he is going to challenge a lot of what we think we know about math, how students learn math, how you learned math, because maybe you didn't learn it the way you thought you did, and maybe we don't use it the way we think we do. And then when Steve is finished with his presentation, he'll be joined on stage by Dr. Taja Witherspoon from the University of Alabama, Birmingham, Dr. Ann Dominic from Birmingham Southern College, and Dr. Sandy Ledwell, who is the director of AMSTI, the Alabama Math, Science, and Technology Institute, for a similar conversation and questions from you. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Leinwand.
Great, thank you very much. Perfect. So let's push this guy over to there. So what a pleasure. It is great to be here in Alabama, great to be with all of you. I kissed my wife goodbye this morning over at the Bohemian. Ann taught from 1982 to 1998 at Mountain Brook Junior High School. We are seeing some of her former students because that's the kind of teacher she was. Ann and I kissed each other goodbye, and she said, "Sweetie, please remember you're not in New York. You're not in DC. You're in Alabama. Smile a little, don't talk so fast, and please don't swear." So I'm gonna honor that, and thanks for having me. You know everything. You can read the stuff. I don't need to talk about who I am except to tell you that I have been blessed. I've had 3 jobs in the last 50 years. I have never been promoted. I was ready to teach for the rest of my life. I was ready to stay in the Connecticut Department of Education for the rest of my life at that level. It never appealed to me to be a bureau chief in a bureaucracy. It never appealed to me to be a manager at AIR. I have spent my life in schools and classrooms. I have spent my life worrying about curriculum and instruction and assessment and professional development, because you cannot solve the problems. You cannot move forward if you just focus on one of those things. What you heard this morning that's so powerful is that reading works when we see it as a system. We need to recognize that mathematics is a system, and I'll come back to that idea. And so all that's really important is not the honors and not the things that I've done. What's important is to say to you that, there we go. Oh, this is great. I love a clicker that works. Perfect. Today's really very simple. This is the Big 12. What do we know? And I've got 5 pieces of information about what I think we know. What do we need to do with what we know? And I've got 7 bits. So today really is the dirty dozen. It's the 5 plus the 7, which is still 12. And at 2.2 minutes each, I can do this thing in the 27 minutes I've been assigned, and everybody will be happy. Sorry, 2.2 minutes. And some of you are sitting there going, why is this idiot using decimals? 1/10 of a minute is 60 seconds, 6 seconds. And so 2.2, if I do each slide in 2 minutes and 12 seconds, that's the kind of everyday use of math that makes sense. My friends, what we know with great certainty is that we are awash in massive social, societal, and workplace changes. We know that the needs of the workplace, the needs of this citizenry are so great. You don't have to look very far to recognize that this COVID was made worse by the fact that we have a data poorly trained society. We have too many citizens that ignore the data, that do not believe it's important, that don't know how to make sense of it. They look at a graph, they look at a chart. We are in jeopardy. I don't need to tell those of you who are in the business and the industrial sector the power of the data and the digital readout that goes on everywhere we go. We know that between the computers and the digital readout and the fact that there's automation everywhere, that this world has changed. You stop and say that 4% of the African Americans and only 19% of the white students in 8th grade in this state are deemed to be proficient. Maybe proficient is just too high a bar. Okay, fine. Maybe the national average is only like 39%, and so we're not that far behind. This is not an Alabama problem or Mississippi problem. This is a national problem. In fact, it is a global problem. When we're bombarded with data, when we live in a world of conflicting and opposing evidence, when we live in a world where information is more available than ever, you can't sit without playing with this while you're here. Your entire life revolves around this. 3 times during the morning, I Googled Lexus. I Googled reading. I Googled the San Francisco first 5. Why? Because that's how you learn. That's how you grow. Those are the ways in which we use data, we use information, and we're still teaching kids 4,539 divided by 284. The pandemic wasn't all bad. I put on a tie for the 2nd time in 2 years. That's great. I'm dressed up. I won't be dressed up like this again for 6 months. It's perfect. But the pandemic was a place where, as parents, we got to see what our kids and our grandchildren were doing. We got to see the stuff that worked. We got to see the stuff that made absolutely no sense. And I ask you, when what's important is, it's about 15. So when we press the wrong buttons, which we so often do because we're thumb-tied, we know that we have to do it again because it wasn't even close to 15. That's number sense, guys. That is what's missing. That's estimation. It's not these worksheet pages of the math that no one does ever again. Take it up to high school and look at how. All right, here we go. Your turn. I need you to factor 3x squared minus 8x plus 15. Go. And you all laugh, sort of, and you don't want to laugh and you want to cry, but you realize that this is what has been used to sort kids out. This is what has been used to determine, oh, you are anointed. You are going to the honors program at the University of Alabama. And you, well, sorry, maybe we have a community college or we have some other workplace. Why would you sort kids out on the basis of a set of skills that no one in this room does outside of a classroom? No one in the state of Alabama does. And so we have a serious issue of an out-of-date curriculum that is not measuring up. We have a mismatch that is not about the Common Core, right? It is a mismatch that's based upon common sense. And we need to recognize if we don't make some adjustments to the curriculum, we're in trouble. What do we know? Ask employees. Ask your HR people. Ask your human relations people. Look at how each and every one of us uses mathematics or should be using mathematics. It's the number sense. It's the, I got ripped off. No, it didn't. I bought a car last Friday. I don't need to go through all the details, but suffice it to say that even though they knew what I do for a living, they still tried to cheat me out of $2,000. First, they put the tax at the Washington, D.C. rate and not the North Carolina rate, which is why I was buying it in North Carolina, right? They purposely, and they did, set the tax on the new car, the $34,000 for a Honda, rather than the difference between the $28,000 that I thought I should get for my trade-in. You know that every one of us gets ripped off by people who think that they are smarter, or the system is we're ignorant mathematically. We don't have number sense. We don't have spatial sense. We don't have symbol sense. And that's where the coaching and the professional development we're going to talk about comes in so mightily, because we need help in how we do that, because it is such a drastic change from simply go and get the right answer. About how many, about how much, right? Do I add, subtract, multiply, divide? Who cares whether you know how to multiply 4-digit by 3-digit numbers if you don't know that it is that X key on the calculator that gives you the useful quantitative result? And if you hit the key with the dash and the hyphen and the 2 dots on it, you're screwed. Ann told me I could say that word. And you all know that what it's all about is a world where we teach people to reason, to think, to argue, to debate. I mean, it's so nice. I'm standing here on the right. I live over there. Elizabeth Warren is my upstairs neighbor in DC, okay? I'm as crazy and progressive as they possibly can come. But you know what? I understand that it is about how we make use of evidence, to engage in debate that is what makes democracy strong. I believe that we fail kids across the curriculum. The 9 most important words, I'm going to deviate from math for a second. The 9 most important words in the entire Common Core, like it or not, the only phrase that's in science, English language arts, and in math: construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Math is, how'd you do it? How did you do it? Who did it differently? It is a recognition that what we know is that we need to make some changes. No one is saying take addition out. No one is saying that fractions are not critically important. No one is saying that we don't need to do a whole lot more with data. No one is saying that algebraic understandings and the idea of function and the idea of variable and the idea of change aren't critical, but let's teach them in ways that work so that kids build that fundamental understanding that have nothing to do with being able to get answers to questions that a calculator or a computer does so much faster. Again, a mismatch, and we know there is a mismatch. What we know that there are too many people in this society that believe there's a math gene. Oh, well, my kid's just dumb. My kid's a good reader, but doesn't just know any math. We know, just as we learned this morning from the reading people, there is no reading gene. 95% of the students can learn to read. 95% of the students can learn math, but they don't all learn it the same way. It's effective instruction that is what removes the idea of a math gene. So go, let's go, come on, ready, set. I can't believe I've just done 10 minutes without a math problem. On your mark, get set. Whoops, 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 there it is. 8 plus 9. I can't hear you. Wonderful. How many proudly sit there and go, oh, 17, good, I memorized it, I know it, I'm so smart. Now, raise your hands proudly, because there are a whole bunch of you. Interesting how few hands go up. You know why? Because you're smart, or you wouldn't be in this room. It's because you figured out how to think and reason. We need school programs that don't bombard kids with worksheets that are about speed, and we need instruction that says, I hate 9, it's 10. 8 and 10 is 18. Take away 1, 17. I see hands going up. That's the way I did it. That's the way I did it, man. You sit there and go, hey, 8 and 8. I love that one. 8 and 8 is 16. One more, 17. You sit there and go, that 9, really? The 9 is really, I mean, the 8 for the 8. The 8 is really 7 and 1. 7 and 1. I think the 1 put it to 9. That's 10 and 7. Look what we're doing. We're talking about alternative approaches. We're talking about different ways of seeing it, right? And now look at 5 plus -9. It is amazing how easy that is, and yet amazing how we still believe we can make that and so much of math work by saying, when you are adding sign numbers, take the absolute value of both of those. Not many of you have forgotten this, thank God. Take the absolute value of the 2 numbers and then subtract them and assign the sign. Would you tell me what assign the sign? That is an insipid rule that has nothing to do with. Every single one of you knows that when Alabama lost to Georgia, sorry, and the same Ann, got here from Georgia, and we sat up all night watching that game. It's just really, if I gain 5 yards on the first play and lose 9 on the second, everyone knows I'm 4 yards behind scrimmage. Everyone knows that if I have $5 and I have a bill for $9, I lose it. And everyone knows that in every single class of 25 kids, there are 2 that do not see a horizontal number line. Those kids need a thermometer. Those kids need to see 9 to 5 degrees in the morning, and then it goes down 9 degrees. Where am I at the end of the day? And they all see 5. Take away 5, there's 4 more to go. In other words, it's how do you see it? How do you picture it? And what tools do you have? That is why we need coaching to support an enlightened curriculum with better instructional materials. And once again, the question comes down to, do we have the will? And we know with great certainty, as I said, that it's a system. Anyone that tries to take one piece, anyone that says, oh, we can do it by fixing the curriculum, we can do it with new instructional materials, it's a system like healthcare. Oh my goodness. The only times I feel good about doing math is when I think about what it takes to do healthcare. My next door neighbor works for Deloitte, right? He has spent the last 12 years on the VA project. That's the Veterans Administration project. 29 distinctly different data systems that Deloitte is still working on integrating. So I understand complex systems, and math is just not that hard. It's not as hard as what we try and do to make healthcare work for everyone, right? Why is Singapore successful? Singapore not just has high quality curriculum, high quality assessment, high quality instruction, high quality professional development, high quality teacher training, but Singapore is about the size of Chicago. It just isn't real. But Singapore has an alignment between those pieces and those systems. The things that people are learning at the National Institute of Teaching in Singapore is exactly what they are expected to do with the materials and with the assessments to prepare kids, and it makes a difference in all kinds of ways. Singapore, an amazing K-5 program. They understand the foundation is what makes the difference, and then everything else follows from there. So what does that mean? I just want to, so good news. The whole slide deck is going to be posted later today, okay? Oh, that's cool. You slap your hand, and you take off the little fuzzy thing, right? So you put the little fuzzy thing back on, and you recognize that I am a teacher who laughs at my mistakes. I am a teacher who doesn't believe that I have to be perfect. I am a teacher that smiles and says, mistakes grow your brain. We get away with that in social studies. We get away with that in reading. We don't ever get away with that in math. X wrong, stupid. And then you wonder why we lose kids. And so all I want to do is say to you that there's the laundry list. That when you think about the legislation that's coming, when you think about what a district has to do, when you think about what I ask a principal to do, when you think about what every superintendent at the state and the district's level have to do, you know, there it is, guys. I mean, it's a system that is amazingly complex. And we know that you can't pick and choose. You can't cherry pick. And so I'm going to come back to these in my big 7. The point is the slides are up. No one. I should stop right now because you're already on overload. I'm already talking too fast. You can't process this. No teacher would expect kids to learn after this kind of a presentation. You watched your kids in middle school and high school during the pandemic, and you saw which teachers drolled on with 20 minutes of synchronous video. It was absurd. You were dying after the first 4 minutes. And then you watched an English language arts teacher talk for 3 minutes, engage kids with some kind of a model reading thing, and then jump off and say, okay, now you go work on it. And then put the kids in the breakout rooms. In other words, it comes back to instruction. So there is what we all know. And if you don't believe me, go look at the success stories. Go look at Mississippi, as we're doing. Go look at Massachusetts, which is amazing. Go look at North Carolina and see what they've done. Because the bottom line, as you see in what Mississippi has said over and over again, if you want higher math achievement, improve the day in, day out quality of teaching, which requires a clarity of expectations, tangible support, and meaningful accountability, none of which are prevalent in the professional lives of most teachers of mathematics. And I just put that up on the wall. I ask you to think about what kind of things my foundation, my company, my human relations, my community relations departments can do. How do I involve people in all that stuff? There's a piece that's on the handout. I've got 2 that are coming with the website later today. Read it on the way home or tomorrow or something like that. It's why mathematics in the 21st century is different. I covered some of it, not a whole lot of it, but you have access to it. So what do you do with all that? Really, what do? You act strategically on what we know and need to do. And the good news is we have answers. And this is really cool. We don't have answers to a whole lot of societal problems. Okay, we do not know how to undo racism in this society. We do not know how to provide health care for everybody in a fair and equitable way. It's amazing they can do it in Rwanda, but they can't seem to do it in the United States. But that's a separate issue because not all of us have had the pleasure of working in Rwanda. We know what works if it's implemented effectively. We know we can significantly raise achievement for all students. And we don't start with a blank slate. I take my hat off to the fact that you've got AmSty and the Alabama Reading Initiative, and you got North Carolina to go look at. You've got the fact that Mississippi is here, and you'll hear more about it. It'll take changes in beliefs, in practices, in policies, and most of all, it'll take changes in what's been successfully implemented in lots of other places. And so I have luxury. I got Big Seven. They stop back and say, so, Steve, who never wanted to be a manager, Steve, who wants to be a change agent, Steve's website says mathematics change agent. So if I could play all-powerful governor, all-powerful legislature, all-powerful school board, superintendent, principal, teachers, what would I do? Very simple. I would start and collaboratively craft and widely disseminate a vision of effective teaching and learning in mathematics. I put one into the webpage. You can take a look at it. It's 2 pages. I can show you the one from Massachusetts. It is what guides all of the coaching, all the supervision, all of what principals are held accountable for, all of the evaluation. It simply says we know that giving kids a mindless 15-item worksheet is just destructive and inhumane. It says that if we're not engaging kids and asking them questions and having them orchestrate their discourse. And so, again, a vision that communicates to everyone what it is we know and believe in. And that way you put a coach in a school and the coach says, hey, very simple. Here's what the state says. Here's this vision. I'm here to help us do it because we know it makes a difference. We also know that if you listen to me and do those things, that you're going to show up better on all your evaluations. The scores are going to go up and everyone's going to be happy. And so that's where we start. And then we know that that vision has to acknowledge what we know again. This is not a workshop about math. This is not my chance to sit there and do anything other than those 2 silly problems of 8 plus 9 and 5 plus -9, and to compare that with factoring trinomials and doing long division. But what we know is that if we're not clear on our goals, we have no idea where we're going. I watch lessons, I teach lessons. If I'm not clear on my goal, I don't know what tasks to use. I don't know what questions to ask. When I know what I'm trying to accomplish, when I know that there is an exit ticket, a formative assessment at the end, a mini quiz, I know that my job is to have every kid be successful on that quiz if I possibly can. That's a goal. I know that I've got to have context because kids live in the real world and simply naked math is not particularly helpful. You heard how in reading we start with oral language, that stuff that comes. We used to joke about if schools taught kids to speak, we would need remedial speaking. We don't have remedial speaking because schools don't screw it up. We know that in fact context makes a difference. We know that rich tasks are what makes a difference. We know that they're available online in all kinds of places. And so the good news is that's all research affirmed. That's going on in classrooms, and it was going on in the classrooms of the best math teachers you all had. You know who made a difference in your lives mathematically. You know whether it was an elementary teacher, a middle school teacher, or a high school teacher, whether it was in calculus or it was in general math, that person made math come alive. That person did those things. And so, again, we know the answers and the vision needs to incorporate those things. And you have an example that shows up on the web conference webpage later today. Good. 2, you can't do it without enough time. I am beloved by the reading language arts community because for 50 years I've understood I can't teach math to a kid that can't read. I can't assess math if a kid can't write. I look at my own kids, my own grandkids, and I know that they need to have literacy skills first and foremost. And only then do I worry about math. But this idea that after twice as much time, twice as much support, twice as much stuff, when people already are comfortable with reading, and math gets lost along with science and the arts. 2 of my kids are artists. I believe in the arts so deeply, but the arts shouldn't be as equal as math. And so we need to recognize that 60 minutes a day should be a minimum. And I know that's not a very hard state issue, but I do know that at the local level, if we don't have an hour a day, so I do demonstration classes. I plan lessons with teachers. I walk in with slides. You give me 45 minutes and I start to get shrill. I start to cut corners. I know I can't get it done. I ignore kids' questions. I don't pick on some of the kids. I am a far less effective teacher. You give me an hour, you give me 57 minutes, and oh my goodness, I can fill those 57 minutes. I can keep kids engaged. I give them time. I have them doing stuff on the whiteboards and on flip charts, and I have the discussions. I have time for a cumulative review, which is critical. I have time for a number talk when that's appropriate, and I have time for a formative assessment. All said and done. You cannot change those numbers just by changing a curriculum and professional development if we do not recognize that time is significant. The difference between 45 minutes and 60 minutes is an increase of 33%. I don't need to tell those of you in the business community what an increase in 33% would be in terms of sales or of profits. Those are gigantic numbers. Can't be done in less than 60 minutes, and I've said more than I need to say, except that I acknowledge it's the quality of that time, but it's not just the quality if I don't have enough time to do it. I think that we've got an amazing array of free online resources. It is incredible what teachers now have access to. It's incredible what teachers have learned about during the pandemic. And I just want to say that another place is to recognize that our textbooks are resources. They are neither the Bible nor the Quran. That a smartphone gives you all kinds of things. I've got a graphing calculator sitting on this thing. I don't need to go and spend $127 on a TI-84 when I've got sitting right there. Yeah, you all know how much they cost because your kid goes, I'm in high school, I'm in Algebra 2 now, I got to have a TI. Well, why don't you use Desmos? Well, what's that? We're not allowed to, except that Desmos is now on the online reduced SAT, and ACT is not far behind. And so we have access to these kinds of tools that are critical. All I ask you is to go and check out for fun the virginiamathstrength.org site. It is a cornucopia of resources for teachers. It is the go-to place increasingly. And so we've got these resources. That's one of hundreds of places to go. But again, that's where the state and the math coordinators become so critical for making a difference. The point is that no one is going to make this work with just a textbook. And then we've got the accountability. I believe that accountability is critical, not so that we sit there and pat ourselves on the back. I don't believe that the giant state tests or some of the package tests are all that important or that useful because teachers don't know what's on those tests. They just get numbers back. But I do know that we can't go where we want to go if we don't know where we are right now. And we know where we are at the end of every lesson with a quick quiz, with what's called an exit ticket. I can't tell you how many classes I sit in the last 40 years. I can't tell you how rarely I see an exit ticket, a formative assessment. I don't see the, okay, let's see if you learned this today. Ready, set, here it is. Take out a little piece of paper and go and do it. So this idea of an exit ticket that is then used, I've been blessed. I've worked in the Success Academy charter schools for the last 5 years as a consultant. Eva Moskowitz is a force of nature. She is just an unbelievable school leader. There are 50,000 kids in the Success Academy charter schools. They are 94% Black and brown. They are the highest scoring district with 50,000 kids in New York State. They outperform Scarsdale, Chappaqua, Jericho, and whatever you call that place where Sarah Lawrence is. Someone tell me where Sarah Lawrence is. Brookdale, I shouldn't have said that. I don't remember where it is. Bronxville, there it is. That's right. It's Bronxville. So I know there are 3 of you that are Googling Sarah Lawrence. Where is Sarah Lawrence? It's in Bronxville. Good. The bottom line is that we know that this ability to assess what's going on, this ability to have an idea, and then I believe that the single most important assessment are the unit tests that communicate exactly what we expect students to know. My sense of things is that if we own the tests, if we have common assessments, if in fact every single kid in Birmingham public schools is taking the same Algebra 1, the same 5th grade unit tests, we have a metric that we are comfortable with, that we can adjust. It is online, it is done on computer, it is open-ended, it is minimizing multiple choice, but it tells us, darn, that worked. Darn, I was good. Or, oh my goodness. And all I want to do is remind every one of you in this room that it's not the assessments so much as what we do with the assessment data. And so it's just a reminder that if we forget about the school-based, district-based unit assessments, we miss what I've seen as the most powerful of all the changes. And then there's coaching. And I shouldn't have to say anything about it. I mean, look where I am. Okay, can you imagine Alabama and Auburn firing all the coaches except the head coach? Give me a break. Isn't going to happen. They're the Atlanta Braves, right? You know how many millions of dollars we pay all of those NFL and Major League Baseball players? And we have coaches and coaches and coaches and coaches and coaches. Why do we think that somehow when reading language arts is important as it is, and we understand that when we have coaches, the scores go up, and when we back off on that program, things fall down? That's not because teachers aren't stupid. It's because a coach is an indispensable piece in this whole thing, and building a strategy around building off of and institutionalizing what AmSty has done, building off of reading. I just sit there and go, you know, Senator Orr, I read all 49 pages of your initial bill, and I am amazed at how much great stuff there is in that bill. I want to send that to 49 other states and say, look at this, how much of this do you have in place? How much of this are you mandating in a sense from the state level? So all I'm going to do is say to you that trained high quality coaches. I believe that a coach works for a year and only gets rehired on the basis of a 2/3 vote of the people they coach. Yeah, that's what accountability is. And all I'm going to say is, look at this last thing. Walk through a school with a math coach. Listen today as somebody says, oh my God, it's Ann Dominic. Ann Dominic was my coach. I became a teacher because of what Ann Dominic did when she came into my classroom. Coaches who co-plan, who co-teach, coaches who do not sit in the back of the room, but sit up near the front of the room, coaches who co-reflect, coaches who help us grow. And I just think that that's the professional development. Professional development, we ram all the elementary teachers into a room and have Steve Leinwand come in with all of his hoopla, his energy, and all that stuff at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is a waste of time. And every teacher knows it. No business would operate professional development like that. We also know that all this dream of online stuff without the social interaction doesn't work for law firms. It doesn't work for corporate training. It doesn't even work well for auto mechanics. Ask Honda, ask Mercedes, ask Ford. And so I'm not going to say anything other than it's on the table in everything you've done, and to walk away and not recognize the power of trained coaches held accountable. Coaches should be working 4 days a week and training on Friday. No one wants to be coached on Friday. Fridays are the day that the coaches get together and watch videos and hone their skills, and they laugh about what's working and what's not working, right? I'm on the phone every Thursday with 3 coaches in a school in Michigan, right? It's great. I mean, I just have to say, so what's working, what's not working, and we talk through the problems. That's their professional development. And it requires leaders and leadership. And there it is. You set your clock and you're perfect, okay? I have about to run out of time, because I do not believe in upsetting the flow of an agenda, nor messing up lunch. Every one of you knows that if you want a job done right, you hire someone who has the knowledge and the experience, someone that has the time, someone who assumes the responsibility. In most of Alabama, there is no person in most schools and school districts assigned that responsibility. So where does it fall? Through the cracks. A principal? Give me a break. The teacher who sort of is great and everyone assaults in the teacher's room in the morning? No, we need to have a designated leader, and it's just, you know, just that clear. And finally, parents. I mean, my goodness. Parents read and then they forget. They have their kids read and read back and all that stuff. Once the kid can count to 10 or 100, we're done with math. And all I want to do is say to you that we've got to look at strategies and activities to make math commonplace at the store, at the gas station, the bank. You realize that gas pump is an unbelievable function machine, right? One thing stays constant. It's called the cost per gallon. And then those other things are changing as the number of gallons and the total cost. It goes up, the other one goes up. In all those ways that we look at it. How much is the tip? Why is it? Wait a second. How much is the bill going to be? Make your kids guess. Have them justify their guesses. If I could get that going on in 50% or more of the households, I change the world. If I work with the churches, the white churches, the Baptist churches, the black churches, I know that when I brought calculators into Connecticut and became the first state in 1986 to allow kids to use a calculator on our 8th grade test, and the walls of Jericho did not fall down, my friends at Pratt & Whitney gave us $20,000 to do posters and a campaign about calculator use. I can't think of a better public service than for some of your community relations outfits, for some of you to recognize how helping give parents the tools. Right now, we have an amazing array of things, okay? I mean, it's equal parts math and equal parts reading is what parents do, right? They play games like Yahtzee and they do strategy games and stuff. We do bedtime math. If you've not done bedtime math, if you have a kid or a grandkid who is like between 4 and 9 and you don't know about bedtime math, you're missing out on an amazing resource. Every other night, we read a story. Every other night, we do bedtime math. There are so many things where we don't have enough time, even in an hour a day. But parents are an untapped resource when it comes to math. And so there it is. I come and say to you that all these years of experience, all these years around the world of improving teaching and learning and student outcomes, we have the answers. It's incredibly comforting. We know what it'll take. And that means the question is, do we have the will? Do we have the will to follow through? Do we learn from the data that Ryan shared with us this morning and recognize that this can't just be a one-shot effort? This has got to be a systemic change in how the system operates. Will we make the long-term commitment? Because if we don't just screw the kids, but we hurt ourselves. We undermine our economy. We undermine our property values. We undermine all the things that we believe in. We want to have greater labor force participation for all the right reasons, because a rising tide lifts all ships. And we need to recognize the role math plays in that, and we need to recognize that it takes a very deliberate focus on these things. Do we have the resources to make it work? And so, gang, I'm going to leave out the change, which is perfect. I am going to not worry about questions and simply say to you, what a pleasure. Thank you so much. Great. Great. Super. Wonderful. All right. Let's see if it works, whatever. Thanks.
So we will follow about the same format that we did last time. I'm going to start with a question, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. Listening to Steve talk, one of the things that I was struck by was this notion of professional development and the importance of coaching and all of that. One of the problems that I see is that we often ask teachers, especially at the elementary level, to teach mathematics that they don't really understand. And I don't think it's their fault. It comes from a cycle of bad teaching that they were exposed to and an absence of number sense and experiences manipulating numbers. And I also think that unique to mathematics is this tendency that we have early on to categorize ourselves. We're math people or we're not math people. I'm not good at math. You hear that very early from kids on a playground. And that is a huge impediment to learning. And so a lot of the teachers, again, especially at the elementary level, are people who feel like they can't do math. And so given that we need to change classroom practice and move these teachers and change what's happening, how can we do that? How can we break down that phobia?
Well, what comes to mind, last week or 2 weeks ago, we had the privilege, a colleague and I went to some local elementary schools. And one of the questions we opened up with was, what is math? And so it was fascinating to get the different answers from kindergarten to 9th grade. And a lot of kids equated math as just simply memorization, rote memory. Math was painful. So we had all of these negative things about math in the beginning. And then we tasked the kids with building and exploring, and they were building STEM activities and engineering tasks with ramps and pathways. And at the conclusion of that, we asked them, the follow-up question is, what is math? And it was fascinating to see kindergartners, 9th graders, 6th graders have a different outlook on math just by simply engaging them in the task to broaden their concept of what math is. And so too often we think math is just rote memorization. And from the mouth of a kindergartner, math is building, math is failing. And so we really were able to encapsulate on that and say, like, failure is the first attempt in learning. And all great things, it took several iterations of that. So I think the very first thing that we need to do is just think about, what is math? And like Dr. Steve said, we have to think about math as reasoning. And oftentimes we do. I hear parents, I hear all types of people, I'm a great reader. What book are you reading? And I'm not great at math. And sometimes they say it with pride. Oh, my husband does the math homework. And so we help them to see that we're all great at math. I know not to walk to the edge of that. A baby knows not to walk to the edge of that. And so we're great at math. We just have to think about, what is math, and broaden that perspective from babies on the way up through college, because we also work with pre-service teachers. And we did the same task with pre-service teachers, and we saw the same thing also.
And I'd like to connect on to that just a little bit by saying, I heard earlier this week, if we don't need all of this professional development, we don't need all of these coaches. These are highly skilled, highly trained graduates of teacher ed programs. They know how to do elementary math. Probably all of you in the room know how to do elementary math. If I presented to you a 3rd grade math problem, a word problem, you could all solve it. But that's not what we're asking teachers to do. And that's not the kind of professional learning that we're providing for teachers. We're asking the teachers to be able to take that student evidence from that word problem and look at it and sort it into, well, these kids know this part. These kids know a little bit more and a little bit different. My responsibility as the teacher is to get them to mastery of the state standards. But each one of them has a little bit of a different need, and they're at a little bit of a different place. So here's this specialized body of knowledge that I have to have about that elementary math to be able to move not just one student on one word problem, but 22 of them at the same time in the same room, all while maintaining control and discipline and. So the professional learning is more than just knowing how to do math. It's, what is that specialized body of knowledge that I have to have about how students learn math, about how people learn math, and what are those stages of that development, and how do I help the students move through those stages? That's the kind of professional learning that we're talking about. And that's the kind of specialized knowledge that a coach has. And that's why it's so important to have a coach in the classroom to help connect, bridging that knowledge that you're getting in professional learning to the practice of helping the students be able to move where you need them to move. That's the focus of where we're headed, and where AmSty has built our new model of professional learning and support in the classroom based on that premise.
And could you follow up on this at the concrete level? I mean, think about the 3rd grade teacher who's struggling with fractions. They hate fractions. They don't really understand fractions. You walk in as a coach and do what?
So I think it's
it's knowing that there are misconceptions that children will commonly have that is part of that specialized knowledge that Cindy was talking about. And anticipating what students might do requires teachers to have not only knowledge of how to get the answer, because most of us think that for someone to be proficient in math, they need to get the right answer. That's true, but there's so much more involved. I can't tell you the number of classrooms that I've been in where students, even up to 5th grade, will be looking at an addition problem and put the big number in their head and count up. You can get the correct answer that way, but you are crippled in order to go on if that is your strategy for getting an answer. We know that in countries where the language supports place value, so knowing that 12 is a 10 and 2, in Asian countries, 12 is translated 10-2, and 13 is translated 10-3. And we know that students who speak Asian languages develop an understanding of place value long before students who speak English. Well, that makes sense, right? What does 13 mean? How does that support the relationship of what's really going on there? But if you have grown up talking about, I'm going to carry the 1, and that's what we hear all the time. And it's not a teacher's fault if that's what he or she has always known. But you need to know that's not helping a child understand that this number is 10 and 2. And that specialized knowledge of understanding what misconceptions are out there and how am I going to front end to help prevent some of those misconceptions. But when I see them, which you inevitably will, what do you do to put that child in a point of disequilibrium? Like, wow, no, that really doesn't make sense, because math is the study of logic. And that's what we often miss. It's not just being proficient at getting an answer. It's far beyond that. To really be proficient in mathematics is to be able to solve those problems that you all solve all the time in your work. That's what we want. We want students who can think logically and not just turn to the teacher and says, is that right? Is that right? They know it's right because we've looked at several different ways. They all get the right answer. They don't need the teacher to say, that's right. That's what we've got to develop, that confidence, because if a child is not confident in their mathematical ability, there are so many professions that are closed to them. And that's not what we want. We want students who have all the options open. And we know that all students can learn mathematics. And we've got to do the teaching that makes that available to them.
How often have we all heard, I never knew that. How come no one told me that before? That's when you feel like you're valued as a coach. We really only have 2 choices. We can look at Singapore and we can recognize that Singapore said, where's the best induction program in the world? Oh, good, the United States residency program for doctors. No one is allowed to practice medicine just because you have an MD after 4 years at Yale or at UAB. You all know that it is the residency program that makes a difference. Teachers don't have a residency program. I mean, it just, it's not doable. So either we build a residency program and actually talk about a 3-year sequence where the first year they are only co-teaching with master teachers, and the second year they are fully supervised but teaching their own class, and the third year they're the people who the first year teachers are watching, or we build in a coaching model. There is no other way to bring things to scale the way we need.
Y'all have questions? Don't be scared. The math people are by.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Ahmad Hamouri from Jacksonville State University. And I just would like to add to the effort of preparing good coaches who can go to the elementary schools and support our in-service teachers. So we at Jacksonville State University, we are in the process of developing a math specialist program. It's a master degree that actually going to graduate math coaches who will go back to the elementary schools in which they will work as action researchers who will be collecting data in a daily basis from the students, from the teachers, and take the necessary actions needed to support these teachers to make sure our students are learning mathematics effectively. So you are making wonderful statements, and as I was sitting here with my colleagues, we were saying, yes, we are going into this direction. The other thing that I want to add when we talk about mathematics, in 1966, Henry Pollock, who is a mathematician and an educator, said, if we would like to reflect the true picture of mathematics, then instead of telling our students, here is a problem, solve it, we need to tell them, here is a situation, think about it. It was in 1966, and at that time, he was referring that to mathematical modeling. So now we have a huge focus on mathematical modeling, especially in the Common Core state standards, where 40% of the standards for the high school level address mathematical modeling. So this is how we should envision mathematics, because again, when we go back, when our students graduate and go to their daily lives, it is not always, here's a math problem, solve it. It's always different situations that they need to deal with in which they need to apply mathematics. So thank you.
I think that's really validating of the things that we're all saying. I would only warn you, yes, build in a coaching certification thing, but do not mandate it. I mean, you will have any number of great potential coaches who just are not going to put up with the time and the effort and the money to become coaches. We can hire them, we can say that's a good thing, but I would never require it because we know there are too many great teachers that don't have teacher certification. So I just think that that's one thing. Two, I love the action research. I think that action research is a wonderful way to frame the program, but when we're talking about coaches, we cannot afford to lose sight of the fact that a coach needs to be trained to support the shift in behaviors and practices by classroom teachers. And action research is a small piece of that. It is, what do you do to help? How do you smile? How do you engage people? How do you learn that what worked with Mrs. M is not going to work with Mr. T? It's almost like we need to learn what HR has taught us about human relations and how to deal with employees. A coach is a critical player, and a coach cannot be stolen by the principal. Let me just say one other thing, while we're doing, I mean, you can go, and I'm going to shut up. You can go to my website and read the piece, why sixth grade is the single most important grade in the K-12 curriculum. Yes, building the foundation is critical, and nothing is as important as what goes on in the beginning. But if we're going to change those eighth grade numbers, if we are going to get more kids into real meaningful high school, if we're going to raise the number of kids that are doing STEM careers and the like, sixth grade is the place that boys and girls either say, wow, this is cool, I get it, and they thrive. Or sixth grade is where we just lose them. Sixth grade is harder to teach mathematically than calculus. Calculus is pretty easy to teach. It's just not a big deal. The idea of multiplicative change versus additive change, the idea of a ratio and a proportion, the idea of a percent. Let me tell you something. You think about being a sixth grade teacher. We introduce all of algebraic thinking in sixth grade now. We are moving the algebra so it's not a course, but it is a continuum of understandings. When algebra ideas of a variable, an equation, an expression are done right in sixth grade, oh boy. I tell middle school principals, take your very best two teachers, put them in sixth grade. Yeah, but they gotta do eighth grade algebra. No, they don't. Anyone can do eighth grade algebra. They need to be the sixth grade teachers. And I think the same thing about ninth grade. Those are small changes that make a gigantic difference.
Thank you. Jack Williams with Public Television. I'd really like to ask who thought putting letters in math problems was a good idea, but I'll pass on that. How do you, by the time my kids hit the fourth grade, I told them you're on your own. I can't help you anymore. And you mentioned involving parents. How do you engage parents that don't get it, don't have a clue how it operates?
I tell parents that their job is not to teach math. I can't ask parents to teach their kids to do division of fractions because all they know how to do is invert and multiply. It's not helpful. It just reinforces all this stuff the kid is struggling with. And so I ask parents to make mathematics commonplace. I ask parents to say, how much is the bill going to be? I ask parents to say, so what is the tax about going to be? I ask parents to sit there and go, about how many? I ask parents to sort of read something out of the newspaper and sit there and go, look at this graph, I can't believe it. And carry on a discussion about what's going on with that graph. I mean, just yesterday, the New York Times actually came out with an article about the census and the fact that they undercounted 18 million people. But they didn't really undercount. They just had 18 million whites as opposed to the 18 million Black and Hispanics. And so they used the wrong word. And today's paper, they have the correction. In fact, on the website, they had it corrected within an hour. I mean, it's making math commonplace and being able to recognize that we make mistakes. I think that's what's key. I'm not going to ask a parent to make things worse by telling their kids rules, which is all, the worst teachers know, and therefore parents reinforce.
And one of the things that we have started on the early end, not at the 4th grade level, but back in January, we have recognized that this whole situation that you were talking about with people with math anxiety, I'm bad at math, that starts very early on with our students, even before they come to school. So we know from our beginning of the year screeners in mathematics that our students are coming to school not prepared to start kindergarten level mathematics. So we are starting at that early end and pushing out community and family resources for families to do just small, simple things on a calendar that they can do every day. Go outside and pick up 5 rocks, line them up in order from biggest to smallest, sort them according to color, count them, put them in a line, cover 2 of them up. How many do you see? So how many are covered up? All of those simple little things that parents and family members can do every single day with their students. We're starting there, and we will move up as we are able to do that. There's always more things that you want to do and more resources to provide than you have the people and time to do. We'll get there. We'll get to 4th grade.
These are the people who can help us deliver those messages.
Absolutely.
So Anne, will you talk a second about the parent and family nights that you guys used to run as part of the Greater Birmingham Math Partnership? Because I found those to be very effective. At least we had research that showed that they were very effective in pulling parents into the conversation.
No, parents want to help. They know how to help children study for spelling test, but they don't often know how to help children with math because all they can rely on is what they learned. And if we're trying to help students to go further than their parents might have, then we need to help those parents have the tools to do that. And so particularly at the lower grades, there's a lot of games. Steve mentioned playing Yahtzee. There is so much math that you learn from playing Yahtzee when you're looking at how do you just know that's a 6 as opposed to having to count them, or I got 3 6s. How many is that? There is so much math that you can help parents put in front of their children in a friendly way, in a way that's fun. It invites great family time, but when we often had hundreds of parents who would come to these family nights because they wanted to know what to do. So,
well, and there was dinner and childcare.
Oh, yes, we raffled bicycles, we gave extra points, we did whatever we could, because honestly, there are a lot of parents who have had terrible experiences with math. And so coming to a math night is terrifying. But to give them those tools that are fun to do with your child empowers them in a way that can help put math in perspective and make it friendly. It's not so scary, something we can do together. And it's okay to say, wow, how did you think about that? Oh, I thought about that differently. But we teach parents how to have those conversations.
And empowering parents to, again, think about, what is math? And so last week I gave a post-assessment. I introduced an elementary strategy with high school students where they made the fraction kit. And the post-assessment was 1/2 + 1/2. And a third of the class said 2/4. And so I didn't want to pull a small group, the third of the class. What I did, I went around to different kids in this classroom and I said, hey, By the third kid, I said, take math off the table for a second. What do you know about 2/4? They had just built the fraction kit. And a kid said, it's 1/2. I said, okay, now let's go back to that math problem. Read it to me. And they said 1/2 plus 1/2. It's like, oh, that's not right. And then I added context to the problem. And I said, if you had a half and I give you another 1/2, how much would you have? And they said 1/2. And every kid was able to correct that. So if parents can just ask kids, what's the reasonable answer here? You may not know how to solve it, but you can help to build and scaffold that kid to think about math is logic. It's not about just memorizing, because when you get to the higher grades, if the only strategy you have is the standard algorithm, you can't memorize everything when you get to the higher grades. It works when you're in elementary. When you get to higher grades, you don't remember if you need to flip, change, cross, multiply. You don't know if you add straight across or multiply straight across. And so you want kids to think about, does this make sense? Like, be able to defend your thinking. And that's what parents can do, even if you don't understand the math. Just push on their thinking. And because we do feel more comfortable helping early childhood with the games, we do start to crumble at grade 4. As you said, I was a 4th grade teacher. And my parents became believers, because one thing, so if I'm teaching addition and I'm having my kids think about alternative strategies, parents will tell them, oh, I'm going to show them the traditional algorithm, and they do that. But when it was time to start operating with fractions, they didn't do that. And so that's when they were able to see, oh, okay, my students can do this, my child can do this, and make sense of it. And so I hear you. 4th grade is where the math gets real, in 4th grade. And so maybe as a parent, parents can just sit down and have kids to think about, is this a reasonable answer? Like, does this make sense? And so that's how parents can support us.
That's great. I'm afraid we're out of time for this panel. I know both panels